16 seasons. What is that? What is that? How does that make you feel?
Obviously it's makes me feel very good. I'm proud of the show that we've done. When you talk about somebody like me, who was a Chicago cop, who was working security on the Jerry Springer show, to get his own show, somebody who's never tried to be in the entertainment field, to have a show that lasted 16 seasons, it's an accomplishment, because you see over since the last 16 seasons, the shows that have launched, people like Ricky Lake that came back, Jeff Probst, Nick Cannon last year, big name people, celebrities, and they didn't last. So for a guy, a no name, somebody, nobody knew. I did have a little following on Springer, but the last 16 seasons, I'm really proud of that.
Your show, so 16 years, which means it started in 2006. I'm doing my math correctly. What would you say is the biggest difference between now and then in regards to the voice and the direction of the show?
Well, the biggest difference is when you're starting out, you really don't know what you're going to do, even while you're doing it. And then you find your niche, and you start getting ratings, and people like the show that you're doing, and then you kind of run with it. And in the beginning of the show, I would get so emotionally involved and so worked up, and I'd throw chairs and scream the first couple of years that I wasn't myself. And then the big difference was my wife took over the show kind of halfway through season 2, and she said, "Hey, we're not going to produce you anymore. You're going to be you. You're going to react to these stories the way you want to." And then the show really kind of took off. There was a lot of, instead of just being tough guy Steve and yell, 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 I became more well-rounded and listened to the guests, and not every guest is a bad guest. And so the show just became much better after my wife took over.
And now you kind of have more of a true crimes focused. Well, I guess you always kind of were in that bracket, but how is that a little bit different now?
Well, it's, you go in the direction where the people are watching the show and they start calling in with certain things, and we went with it. And so most of these stories have a crime aspect with it, whether it's a lot of times it's the offender and victim. But a lot of these cases haven't even been adjudicated yet. They're going through the system. So, obviously, I think in TV, if you look at the last couple of years, how people are really into crime shows, shows that cover actual cases.
Yeah.
Me and my wife, we just watched the whole Jeffrey Dahmer.
Everybody's talking about that. Mm-hmm.
So, we're fascinated with events that, listen, I knew all about Jeffrey Dahmer. I remember reading about it. And I had no interest in it, but then we watched it, and it was really good. And so I think that aspect of it, people are always intrigued by situations that are not going to happen in most people's lives.
I thought it was really interesting. I was listening to one of your interviews, and you were talking about the stress of it's a TV, you're on a TV show, so obviously there's a lot of glamour that comes with that, but there's also like the responsibility and the stress with the type of cases and situations that you're dealing with, compounded with being in the military and being a police officer. And you talked about dealing with PTSD and depression, things that I feel like a lot of people can relate to. Things like that don't just go away, right? Like those challenges. And I think that sometimes when we hear these stories, it seems like, oh, it's instant and like I'm good and that's it. What has your journey kind of been with those things, kind of post stopping alcohol, stop drinking, and all those type of things?
Being a police officer, when I was fighting with guys, had to fight for my life a couple times, and you carry that with you. And obviously, I had issues because of that. I struggled with sleep. I struggled with alcohol. Struggled with depression, and not being honest with myself about it. and then, coming to grips with it. It's- My biggest problem was I thought that I was indestructible and I didn't need anybody's help. I didn't need to talk to anybody. So I kept everything inside me. I had to be the big, strong husband, dad. Well, I had a huge depression when we moved the show from Chicago to Connecticut. I mean, it was terrible. And I asked my doctor, why is this happening to me? I couldn't understand why this was happening to me. And he goes, a guy like you have a stressful, you're in your mid 40s, you're stressful career, you have a young family. And he goes, guys like you don't share anything. So when you break to pieces. It's really hard. So I learned to start talking, even if it's with, my parents, my wife, talking to friends, admitting that, hey, man, I'm struggling here. But during the course of that too, I was using alcohol as, to bring me down or whatever, where I didn't, I guess at the time I didn't realize, and maybe I did, that alcohol just pours, fire, fuel on the fire. And I struggled with it. And then, just realizing this is not a good thing for me anymore. So I haven't had a drink in about 5 years.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. First of all, congratulations on 5 years. That's not something that should be brushed over. That there's hard work and a lot of small daily decisions that compound to that. So congratulations on that. And I think that what you said was important, and I think it's true. It's a conversation that I have with a lot of men specifically. We're not very much encouraged to share our emotions. And I think for you to share that, part of the solution was, well, I can't hold all these things and I have to show some of these vulnerabilities and weaknesses. It's like very beautiful. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, man. And I think you've been quite vocal in support people like George Floyd and who have experienced obvious injustice, and you vocalized, hey, that's wrong.
I tell people all the time, my father was a Chicago policeman for 30 years, and I was a Chicago policeman for 12 years. My father never killed anybody. I never killed anybody. Most policemen are looking to go to work, do their job, and then come home to their families. I never wanted to brutalize anybody. I didn't want to exert authority over anybody. I wanted to go through my day with the least amount of resistance as possible. I did feel like I was there to serve the community. I do believe most policemen and women feel that way. Do you have bad actors wearing uniforms and exerting their control over the public, having a fascination to use excessive force? No doubt about it. Somebody loses their life because of bad misconduct of police officers. It should be exposed. It should be shown throughout, because I do think maybe that would keep somebody else, I don't know if this is a good term or not, on the leash, to pull back instead of escalating. And I do think for a long time, especially when I was a police officer, maybe my father, well, there was not a lot of de-escalating training with the George Floyd thing. The fact that no other policeman there said, hey, get off him. Does he deserve to go to prison? Yes, he definitely deserves to go to prison. And the thing that I hate is when people like try to defend those actions, like, well, you weren't there. I don't have to be there. You know what? If you want to take up that point, you're wrong. And that's why people hate the police. Because if you can't in good conscience say that's wrong, that's a problem, well, that's why people hate the police.
For most people, it is not like, this is obvious injustice, right? But there is this dynamic that I thought was interesting that you shared, was that for police officers, you're not doing anything bad, but you're all witnessing these bad things. There's this like, well, these are the people I have to continue to do this life-threatening work with, and like maybe I need to, I'm probably gonna keep my mouth shut because I'm trying to take care of my family, which I can understand. But what do you think it would take for them to be more willing to speak up or be more willing to enact a structural change?
Well, I do think now, with video recording, body cams, people on the street recording. Listen, I think there was 3 other policemen that were sentenced with the George Floyd case. And I think that is opening up a lot of police officers' eyes, saying, I cannot keep my mouth shut because I kept my mouth shut, and guess what? I'm going to prison now too. So I think it's opening a lot of law enforcement's officials, police officers, sworn officers, that I can't just stay silent. I cannot just stand there and watch a crime being committed by somebody wearing a uniform. I'm going to have to take action. But I also want to say on the other side of it, you have to have police officers in this society. You have to have somebody enforcing the law, protecting people against violent people. And I do think, I would hope that everything's going the right direction, that police officers need to be respectful of citizens. But I also would, I hate this backlash against the police and hating the police. Most people take that job because they want a paycheck and, they want a pension and benefits. They're not looking to brutalize anybody, and they're trying to do a good job. And so I think there's a majority of police personnel that just, hey man, they want to do a good job and they want to go home. They're not looking to hurt anybody.
Yeah. Well said. And yeah, it's definitely a line that we're all needing to figure out how to maneuver together. But congratulations on season 16. Thank you for sitting and talking with me, man. It's a pleasure to meet you, and best of luck going forward.
Thank you. Good luck to you also.